Hello class, it's Dr. Mike here. So we're looking at installation of Linux. And for this sample here, we'll look at CentOS Server and Ubuntu. These are both in NetLabs. There's a separate video for how to logged in and how to run a NetLab. So assuming you watched that and you got in and you started these labs. This install lab actually, there's two of them, but really they're the same. They both have Ubuntu workstation and CentOS. The content's different. So the content tab here, this one's for CentOS, so it's kind of step by step. So I'm not going to ruin the surprise. I'll let you walk through it yourself. But understand how to install Linux, and at least for the initial part of the class, we're looking at the basic install, which stops here on page 12. So we're not doing any changes. We'll do changes later to the grub menu. We'll talk about what that is. So first off, again, we'll just look at the initial basic install, and we'll look at both. You can see here, we'll go ahead and with Ubuntu, we will just install Ubuntu. And it's pretty straightforward. The installers for Linux, at least the major distros, are pretty good. They're going to be pretty easy. Step by step, sort of a wizard-based type of install. CentOS may have, I think, has a hub-based, at least for the GUI install. You come back to the central screen and you make selections for like disk partitioning, network setup, and so on. For Ubuntu, it's a continue next. You can see here we're not connected. I disconnected it from the network. There's no internet connection here in NetLab, so I went and turned that off. But normally, if you were doing it in real life, you could actually install third-party software like MP3 plugins and so on. And you can also download updates while installing. And I definitely suggest this. If you're doing this for your actual own use, maybe it's even a VM, virtual machine, something you're going to use, even just to experiment with, it's good to have the updates. It could fix bugs, but also moreover for security. If you're doing this on a piece of hardware, you definitely want to have those updates. So this is a great option. So make sure you have at least your Wi-Fi set up, Wi-Fi password, and or a hardwired connection. So pretty straightforward. Continue. Warning: yes, this will delete any files on disk. Again, this is a virtual machine here within NetLab, so it's fine. If you're doing this in a VM, you'll get the same thing. You can delete all files on the virtual machine. This is if you're going to resize do your own partitioning. There's actually a separate section of this course where we'll do that. So for now, again, we're looking at beginner installation. I'm just going to let it go take as is, install now. You can see it found a 17.2 gig VM disk. Again, what's our time zone? New York. Keyboard, you can test it out. All right, it looks good. Your name, Dr. Mike, choose a password. I'll just say log on automatically for now. Normally you don't have a password, I definitely would suggest that. Again, when we look at these step by step, there's actually a password and a username you will create for the labs. And then we'll put in a password here. We'll put in password 1, how's that? It's weak. In the sense of a NetLab, it's fine. Again, real life, have a strong password. I can't say that enough. Basically, you let that run. For CentOS, the CentOS installer is a little different. The mouse is not going to be needed here. We can use our arrow keys. And this installer is more over a TUI, text user interface. Let this fire up here. While it's doing that, let's talk about, excuse me, let's talk about this thing right here. Okay, I hit tab, wanted to skip. We're going to skip this media test. So normally, if you download an ISO file, you'd want to test it. You want to make sure you have good integrity on your media. But for the NetLab portion, you can skip it. and just move on. So we'll skip the media test for NetLabs. They're known to be good already. It's the same media every lab. But again, if you download it, another way too is to do an MD5 check. And there's a lot of guides on that online, so I won't go over that here. So you can see I'm using the tab key and arrow key. So no mouse here. And again, you could, oh my God, error processing drive. This device will be new reinitialized. This looks a little scary at first. And the idea is this. That disk drive it's installed into, it's a virtual disk. We know it's going to wipe it. It's going to wipe everything off it, and it's going to install Linux. This is fine. You're doing a virtual machine at home in a VMware VirtualBox, this is also fine. Nothing's going to be lost. If you're doing a dual boot system, verify you know what disk you're pointing at. With virtualization today and the power we have, even with a simple desktop, even laptop computer is pretty powerful. You can get a really nice virtual machine set up. I suggest virtualization, but if you're doing a dual boot system, just make sure you're pointing at the right disk. It should do that, but always know where you're writing to. So I'm going to reinitialize all. It's fine. UTC, again, tab down. OK. Password. Do Red Hat. Red Hat. It's a weak password, yes. Again, this is a virtual machine. You can see here it's going to replace any existing Linux in this 16 gig drive here. Again, OK. Right, changes the disk. I'll let it go. So let's talk about what's doing. So normally in the old way of Linux, I say old, I'm talking pre-Grub 2, and Grub is our bootloader. So we're talking legacy stuff, or legacy BIOS. You normally would have at least 3 partitions. Our root, which is our slash, which is where everything installs to, our /boot partition, and then swap. Swap is virtual memory. Now, today, if you use either one of these distributions here, Ubuntu, let me start that. Ubuntu and or CentOS, you're going to have more of a hybrid setup here. There it goes. It's going to use something called a logical volume management. Again, we're taking the default installs here. We're letting it do its own thing. We're not going to do the partitioning yet. That's a later chapter in this course. So it's going to create its own partition. It's going to use something called an LV. You'll see LV inside there. It's logical volume management. It's sort of a hybrid way to manage storage. So in either case, you notice we didn't set any of these partitions up. We'll let it do its own thing. Again, for a basic install, that's great. Most of, 90% of the time, if I'm installing to a virtual machine, maybe I want to try Linux out. Maybe I actually use it for some tasks. All that partition itself. Where you really get into partitioning is when you look at things like servers. We need to actually set aside partition space. And partitioning is just basically carving the hard disk up into slices for certain uses. Example, maybe I have a lot of users and we have a /home directory that's really large under logical volume I can manage. But for single user mode, one user will do its own thing here. So again, you can see it's done pretty fast. If you do this other ways, you'll actually come across options where you can pick certain software. All right, reboot. Reboot. So there's a lot of options. Again, the best thing to look at is look at the guides for your distribution or distro. If I was doing CentOS, CentOS has a complete guides online. It shows you how to do step-by-step install. There is a GUI-based install for CentOS. And Ubuntu, of course, has the same thing. There's our login for that. And here's our Ubuntu workstation. Again, I'm going to turn this off here. There we go. So let's talk about one thing in the course. So that's it. The install is done. Practice installing and understand how to find stuff after you get something running. Now, during this course, going to show you here. There's a lot of things you need to do. You take a lot of screenshots. And when we do screenshots during the course, we take what's called a date-time name stamp. So you'll see, and it's actually outlined in the course labs, to echo your name and two at symbols and date. There we go, that's it. So this is pretty important. Yeah, okay, turn this off, close this, there we go. Again, echo and quote your name, Dr. Mike, if I can type correctly today, two at symbols, and the date command. And then let's say I do this, there we go. So take my screenshot. This is basically my name and date on my homework. You're going to see this in all labs, at the top of all labs. Unless otherwise directed, you are expected to go ahead and put your name and date on any screenshot you take. So let's say example, a screenshot says do an ls-l, a long list of files for the current directory you're in. You can see here, before that or after it, I do my name and date with this right here. Echo, space, include your name in quotes, space, two at symbols, and the date command. And you can see here it actually echoed out my name and it put today's date, and that's it. This is, of course, unfortunately, to prevent cheating. This helps you basically show that you did the work. So I've taken screenshots here. I would be set to go. And there we go. There's my homework. So again, install is pretty easy. There's step-by-steps in both labs, what to do. Again, we're going up to, this is for the very beginning of the course, up to the part where you make configurations to your bootloader. That's later in the course. So in any case, that is the NetLabs. That's the install. And go ahead and practice as many times as you like. And just feel comfortable with doing a basic install. It will be needed for later in the course, especially the CentOS server. This will be needed specifically for the midterm. So you will be installing CentOS server yourself and using it as part of your midterm. And any questions, always let me know. Thanks.